Hey, it's Cal Ewing here. I'm a real estate and mortgage note investor, and in today's video we're going to talk about some key things you need to think about when you're trying to establish the value of a piece of real estate. So if you've been in real estate at all, you're going to know that we often rely on real estate agents to pull a comparative market analysis, or CMA, and or pull comps, as we like to say, so that we can figure out, well, what is a piece of property worth in its current condition, and if you're planning on doing any kind of construction or remodeling to the property, what is the value of that property going to be once the remodels and construction is complete, right? We want to be able to predict ahead to know what we can sell this property at if we're flipping a house, or if we are doing brand new construction and selling it off, or maybe even wholesaling deals to fix and flippers if you're a real estate wholesaler. So all of these things require you to know how to determine the value of a piece of property based on similar properties that have sold recently in a similar area and in similar condition. So most people, to save time, and if they're new to the business, will require a real estate agent to do this for them, but not all real estate agents are created equal. So it may be good, if you're a real estate investor, to educate your real estate agent to make sure they're pulling comps and providing accurate data so that you can establish value without any error. We don't want to make mistakes in this industry because they can be very costly. So whether you're pulling comps for yourself, and I do that a lot using a software called PropStream, or you're getting your real estate agent or even an appraiser to establish the value for you by finding comparable properties, you need to know these certain things. So I've written them down for you. These are things you need to keep in mind. So number one, when you are choosing similar properties to compare your subject property to, if at all possible, they need to be in a nearby location. Okay, so the rule of thumb is if you can find similar properties within a quarter mile, we're talking miles here because most of my investing is in the US, but we want to be either in the same subdivision if possible or within a quarter mile. Now that's not always possible, depending on where you're investing. If it's a unique property or a more rural area, you may have to expand that to a half a mile or even a mile. But as a rule of thumb, we want to get, the closer the subject property is to the comparables, the better, because market values can change from neighborhood to neighborhood, area to area. So the closer it is to your subject, the better comparable it's going to be. Number two would be the size of the property. So whether we're looking at lots or we're looking at the size, the square footage of a house, we want to find similar properties that have sold that are similar in size. A tiny 800 square foot house is not going to sell for the same price as a 2,000 square foot house, right? So we want to be looking for similar properties within about 15% of the square footage of your own, plus or minus, okay? So most single family homes, we're talking about plus or minus 200 square feet from what your property is. So if your property that you're looking at is 1,200 square feet, you want to find comps, if possible, comparable properties that have sold that are within 1,000 and 1,400. So 200 square feet on each side, if possible, right? We can't always do this. Sometimes we have to expand that outwards, but a good rule of thumb is to find properties that are about 15% plus or minus in square footage from your subject property. The next one is the beds and baths, if we're talking houses here. So we want to be comparing apples to apples. So if your property that you're wanting to evaluate is a 3-bedroom, 2-bath, we want to find similar properties that are also 3-bed, 2-bathrooms. And this is especially important if you're considering, say, a 2-bedroom house versus a 3-bedroom house, because in most cases, people are going to value a 3-bedroom house more than a 2-bedroom, because most people have families and they have kids and they want more bedrooms. So people would pay a lot more for a 3-bedroom than they would a 2-bedroom. Whereas possibly if it's a difference between a 5 and a 4, maybe the price difference might not be that much different. So it kind of depends on the configuration and the size of the property. But in general, you want to be comparing 3 beds to 3 beds, 4 beds to 4 beds. Same with bathrooms, especially when you're talking the difference between a 1-bathroom house and a 2-bathroom house. There can be a substantial price difference or sale price difference between a 1-bedroom or 1-bathroom and a 2-bathroom or a 3-bathroom. So again, compare apples to apples. The next thing is like type. So now we're talking about the type of property. So we could be talking about comparing a ranch style home to another ranch style home, or like a Cape Cod to a Cape Cod. You want to be, if possible, this is sometimes difficult depending on the age of the home and the variety of properties in the neighborhood. Sometimes it's extremely easy because all the homes look the same in your neighborhood. So it's very easy, they're all the same type. Other times it can be a little bit difficult to find houses that are similar in their style of construction and just the way they look, but if possible, try to compare like type. The next one is sale date. So as we've seen in the last year or two with COVID, most markets, property prices skyrocketed in the last 2 years. Interest rates were really low and demand was really high. There wasn't a lot of inventory, and so property prices in most major markets went up very rapidly. But then we've seen in the last 6 months, and I'm recording this in May of 2023, so in the last 6 months, because of high interest rates, property values have started going down, and other reasons as well. But we've now seen properties going down pretty quickly. So when you're looking at comparable sales, you want to narrow that time window. You don't want to be looking at a comparable property that sold a year and a half ago, if possible. You want to be looking at properties that sold 3 months ago. And the faster the market is moving up or down, you want to narrow down that time window even more so that you can get the most reliable data. So right now in 2023, you don't really want to be looking at comparable sales when the market was at its peak a year ago, because things have dropped since then. So we'd want to probably be focusing in the last 3 months at properties that sold within the last 3 months, so you can get a more accurate feel for what the market's doing. The next one is similar features. So we want to be talking now about decks, garages, swimming pools, any other interesting features that your property has. We want to try and find other properties that have those same features because they could determine value substantially. So if you're in an area where a pool adds a lot of value to a home and your property doesn't have one, but all the comparables do, that's a problem, okay? On the other hand, if your property doesn't have maybe a garage, or has a garage and the other properties don't, well, that might be more value to your property than the comparables that you might not notice because you're using the wrong comparables that don't have that feature, okay? So if at all possible, again, try and find properties that have the same special features that your property does, if any, okay? And we're talking lot size as well. That's another feature. So if yours is on a very large lot, you want to try and compare your subject property to comparables that sold recently with a similar size lot as best you can, okay? Then we're talking condition. So if the property you're analyzing is a fixer-upper and in pretty rough shape, and you want to figure out the as-is value of that property, you want to be using comparables that are also in rough, dated shape, that also need remodeling. If you're comparing a brand new remodel to a dated, aged home that needs a lot of work, your values are going to be way off because the comparables are brand new, they're going to be way more desirable, and you're not going to be able to sell your property that's in rough shape for the same amount unless you remodel it. Okay, so we want to be using comparables as best we can in similar age and condition and level of repairs. Okay, and that brings me to age. So age can be a big factor. Obviously, the older a home gets, the more repairs are going to be needed. The more risk there's more chances that things like plumbing and electrical are going to need to be changed. So you want to be, again, comparing. I like to use a range of no more than 10 years plus or minus. So if I'm looking at a house that was built in 1990, 5 years is ideal. You want to be pulling comparables that are within 5 years, so 1985 to 1995 if possible. And if you have to expand out, I wouldn't go more than 10 years on either end, just to be able to narrow down that time window. Sometimes that's not very possible if there's a wide range of ages in your neighborhood of homes, but do the best you can to try and narrow down that. So what it really comes down to, it's pretty easy. It's all about comparing apples to apples. So the more similar your comparable properties are to your subject property, the more you can rely on their sale price and their value when assessing the value of your subject property, okay? And again, sometimes we can't follow all these rules, but if you can follow as many of them as you can, you're going to get more reliable data and reliable value estimates, the more of these rules that you can follow when choosing your comparables, okay? So make sure you educate your real estate agent, and if you're evaluating a CMA that they send you, make sure that they're following these rules as best they can, and if they're not, ask them why. So if one of the properties they choose doesn't fit some of this criteria, go back to them and say, why did you choose this property as a comparable? Explain. Same with an appraisal. If you get an appraisal back and you don't agree with why they chose the comparables that they chose, and usually they'll outline why they chose that in the appraisal, but if they don't, you may need to question them and get them to maybe redo the appraisal or hire another appraiser. Okay, so I hope that was helpful. This is extremely important, guys. If you are buying houses or wholesaling houses or lending on houses or any kind of property for that matter, you need to nail down these skills, or at least have someone on your team, whether that's a realtor, an appraiser, whatever it might be, someone that has this locked in so they can give you reliable data that you can trust when making important investment decisions. I'm Cal Ewing. We will see you on the next video.